As many of you know, I organized a conference in Costa Rica last year with my good friends Nate Henry and Luke Rogers from the Blurry Creatures podcast. To sum up the experience, we had a blast. It was so much fun hanging out with many of you on the beaches, in the jungle, and at the conference event, which was highly intellectually stimulating, to say the least. We were fortunate to be joined by theologian Dr. Joel Muddamalle. Joel and I delved deep into various fascinating and controversial biblical topics. Now I'm going to give you a free screening of one of the sessions from last year's conference in this video. But first, I'm excited to announce that we're doing it again. In February of 2025, from the 13th through the 15th, we will be back in the tropical paradise of Manuel Antonio, Costa Rica, for another epic event. And this time, it's going to be even better. Joe will be joining us once again, but we will also be joined virtually by Laura Sanger and Ashton Forbes. In addition to the daily conference sessions, this year we are planning a nightly beach bonfire hangout with drinks and games to maximize fellowship and fun. Subscribers to my Alberino Analysis members community will get the first shot at tickets. So if you want to join us in Costa Rica, go to the alberinoanalysis.com and subscribe today. Tickets will become available to members on Monday, the 26th of August, and are likely to sell out fast. Last year, the event sold out within a week. So if you want to get tickets, don't procrastinate. In addition to getting the first shot at this year's conference tickets, annual subscribers to my members community will also get access to all of the video content from last year's conference. We filmed and edited every session, and those videos are now available in my members community. One of the sessions featured in these videos is an incredible story from the time when I lived in the jungles of Peru 20 years ago. I've never told this story before in public, but you can go watch it right now in my members community. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy the following presentation from last year's conference. This talk has the coolest name.
I know, I was going to say.
You have the coolest phone.
I do. Yeah.
It's got a flip phone. Do you have the belt clip?
I do.
Yes.
I do.
Tim, you're making the cell phone belt clip cool again.
It's coming back.
Put that on a shirt, Luke.
You know, it reminds me kind of of Star Trek, one of the first ones, the flips.
That's what I'm going for.
I know it.
Make the cell phone belt clip cool.
Would you guys ever guess that me and Joel are huge Star Trek nerds?
I would.
Next generation.
Next generation.
Let's be clear.
Captain Picard.
Captain Picard is my role model.
Yeah.
Make it so.
Make it so. Make it so.
So we are talking about the Galactic War and Cosmic Geography, which is a new board game that we're
Yeah, we're working on it. We got a Kickstarter going, so...
Brought to you by Blurry Creatures podcast.
Exactly. We're going to replace Dungeons and Dragons.
Dude. So
Yeah.
we got a board game, got some new shirts. Luke, you can
Does
handle
that
the
mean
merch.
Nate Geordi
It's a
from
lot more.
Star Trek? Who is Nate now?
Yeah.
Data. Nate is Data.
Clearly.
What? Okay.
All right.
Luke's Worf. We knew Luke's Worf. You saw it coming too. I can feel your stress.
You're typecasting me, pal.
Now you guys get a little sample of what it's like in our Airbnb.
Yeah.
All right, we
It's a
got
little
to
wild.
serious.
This is cool
Okay.
though. Like, I like the vibe, and I think that's what we try to do on the podcast. Just kind of, just have everyone lighten up and have a good time and talk about things. So, now that I made it awkward and did the exact opposite of what I just talked about, you know what I'm saying. How do we kick off this conversation? Where do you even begin, guys?
Where are we beginning, Luke?
Probably the Galactic War. It's first in line.
Well, you know what's interesting is we were just sort of brainstorming like what would be a cool thing to discuss with all of us together. Someone threw out cosmic, what's it called?
Cosmic geography.
Cosmic geography, and which is obviously sort of a Heiser-esque term. And then anyone who's read Birthright knows I talk about a galactic war. And so we thought it'd be interesting to explore the similarities and perhaps differences in those two worldviews. There's certainly going to be some crossover. We haven't really discussed it yet, maybe a little bit in private conversations, but there's going to be some crossover, but then at the same time, I think there's going to be some variation in the way that we view, because the word cosmic, I think, means perhaps something different to Joel than it does to me. And I think that's why I use the term galactic. So I guess I'll start here, because that's what Luke told me to do. So galactic is, in my mind, we're talking about something that's contained within the universe, the known universe. And when I say known universe, I'm not talking about our solar system. I mean the universe that we understand to exist because of astrophysics, space, time, energy, matter, that universe, this one that we're currently inhabiting. And I asked earlier, the conversation we were having earlier, does the kingdom of heaven have locality? And so does the kingdom of heaven exist within this space, time, matter, energy construct? Or does it exist apart from it? And so, and I don't know, Joel and I haven't had this discussion yet, or Luke and Nate and I. My view is that the universe as we know it, within this universe, this is where the kingdom of heaven is existent. It's within the known universe. I believe that the universe isn't just created for, let's say, particular kinds of beings. I think the universe is created to contain all beings. And I don't subscribe to a different realm for, and let's be careful with the word realm here. Let me not use that word here. Let me say this. I don't subscribe to a different universe for spiritual beings and then a universe for material beings. It's contradictory to me in regard to the biblical narrative. I see one unified creation in which all things consist. In fact, this is what the Bible says in 1 Colossians 15, that, or rather Colossians 1:15, that the seen and the unseen, the invisible and the visible, all things consist in the Son of God. So that's a sort of a unified field theory, biblical unified field theory, in which everything that was created through Christ, through the Son of God, exists within the same boundaries. I do not, so therefore, and this is just my opinions, by the way, I'm just spitfiring here, some of my own thoughts. Therefore, everything in this universe is subject to the same laws of physics and is subject to not necessarily coming from the same substance, but subject to the laws of physics, which would be universal across the board. So this is the reason why, and I'm going to wrap this up, and then maybe we'll get Joel's perspective. This is the reason why I don't like the term supernatural. Now, I'm not opposed to the use of the term supernatural, and sometimes it's almost necessary. But the word supernatural is not a biblical term. It comes from Latin sobrenaturales, which means above or beyond nature. And I think that something above and beyond nature, outside of God himself, is an unbiblical concept. Now, and what I mean by that is there's only one being who is outside of time, outside of creation, and that is God. And everything else is bound, is in a synergistic relationship and bound by the laws of nature. That would include human beings in the animal kingdom on earth, and it would include angels, heavenly beings. I don't believe that there's, as I said before, a spiritual realm per se and a physical realm. I think there's, I do believe there are realms. I actually subscribe to what I thought I invented this term, and I come to find out I didn't.
That's a bummer, isn't it?
It is. It really sucks. I shouldn't have told you that. A plurality of worlds. So I come from a perspective that we're all within the same universe. When I say we, I mean angels and men, whatever else is out there. But there are plurality of realms. And I have lots of reasons for saying this. And one of the reasons why I believe this way is because Joel mentioned that you have the term sons of God, and a term that is associated with the term sons of God is princes.
Sorry.
And a prince is the way that these terms appear in the text. It's like someone who's in authority over something, right? Now we use the term principality, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in many cases it comes from the word archon or something like that.
Archon
correct?
exousia,
That's
yep.
right. People use the term principality incorrectly because in English at least, a principality is not an entity, it's not a being, it's a realm governed by a prince. Yeah. Now, that's maybe a bad translation of the original Greek in these circumstances. I don't know, that's something Joel can speak to. But when we say principality, understand, when we use that terminology, we're talking about a realm governed by a prince. And I think that's actually very accurate. Now, we talked about earlier, I'm going to wrap up in 1 minute. We talked about earlier that Adam was created to be in the family of God as a son. And there's a reason that he was given dominion of the earth, because the sons of God govern. And that's why I think that it's a family affair. It's a royal family. And so if you're going to create a new being, let us create man in our image, this decision that's being deliberated in the council, in divine council. In Genesis, let us create man in our image. I think, number one, I think that statement is made in the aftermath of something that happened. And this is an inflection point. Let's create something new. But this new thing that we're going to create, mankind, we're going to make it part of the family. We're going to make this new creature a part of the family. So I would say that's why we're made in the image of God. That's one of the reasons why we're made in the image of God, because it's a symbol of our membership in the family. But also, we had to be made part of the family in order to govern the earth, because the sons of God govern. And that's why this word princes is associated with sons of God, because the princes govern in the kingdom. So, one more thought on supernatural. So when I say I don't like the term supernatural, that's not to say that I don't believe in the spiritual. Okay? I make a distinction between what people consider supernatural and spiritual. So spiritual can be a form of existence that is different than embodied matter. Or maybe it's not so different, but we just don't understand it yet. We don't have the capacity to understand what that even means yet. So supernatural, the word supernatural is amorphous, and I feel like it doesn't have any explanatory power, because you have to start from I think a flawed assumption that there are creatures, there are beings that are above or beyond nature. And I would say, yeah, there's one. God.
Yeah, that's good.
Everything else is within created order and abides by the laws of nature. That God, that were established at creation, because God is not the author of chaos, but of order. So those are my thoughts. And so, just few more seconds. So for me, galactic means within the universe as we know it, and not some alternate universe in which spiritual beings dwell or something. No, everything is happening in this universe.
That's good.
I like it.
That's good.
And if Joel disagrees, it's okay, but he's wrong.
It's true. I did. True story. Maybe at the end of the conference, I will talk about how I almost got all the Jamba Juices shut down in Southern California by making a parallel universe joke.
Did you know that Britt, my wife, worked at Jamba Juice?
Really?
Yeah, and that owner would never give me free smoothies.
See?
And I never went
I
back.
should have got him shut down.
You should have got him shut down.
Luke?
No, I think, yeah,
I think
Luke.
Luke wanted to insert
Yeah,
something
Luke,
before
go.
you jump.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say just one thing I liked what Tim was saying about principality. It made me think of municipality, right? And the idea that a municipality is an area governed by a town or a local town, right? In the same way that a principality is a locality governed by a prince. And I like words, so that makes sense to me. And I think what you said about the idea that we can sometimes, use that terminology for the prince or for this territorial spirit or whatever the governing Elohim may be. I just like that. I hadn't thought of that, so I just kind of put municipality and principality and was like, municipal is the town, local government. That's the area that's governed by it. Prince, principality.
Yeah.
Let's do a word search.
No, but I really do think that this is a big part of why the Genesis 6 narrative was kind of switched and turned into something else. Sort of the Sethite view kind of became because they just couldn't conceptualize that something that isn't from here could come here and mate with us and create these hybrid beings. I mean, it's still a pretty fringe belief of most of Christianity. Most Christians do not accept or have any concept of the blurry verse and the things we talk about. And I think if you have more of Tim's perspective, that's not even a weird thing to say, I mean, it sounds like a sci-fi movie, but maybe this is all more like a sci-fi movie. You guys are Star Trek fans, so it's no big deal.
By the way,
let's get Joel's perspective on cosmic.
Yeah. There's a lot here. I think I want to start with what do we agree on. So a couple of things that I'm trying to figure out I've got so many thoughts. One is theology should always be done in the context of community. I'll start with that. Very, very important that we have spaces like this where Tim can push back on some traditional understandings or non-traditional understandings where my paradigm is being pushed to limits, maybe even broken in some areas. And so I don't think I told you this, but Birthright messed with me. I disagree a lot of times throughout Birthright. And then I went back to it and being like, I didn't say that. I did say, but I think I get where he's coming from, right? And so all that to say, I think there's a couple important things. For the most part, Tim and I are actually gonna say a lot of the same stuff. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, is this a difference with a distinction or not? If it's not a difference with a distinction, then who cares that it's different, right? The distinction kind of has to matter. What is the distinction? Here's the first thing that we both agree on. Supernatural is an imprecise word. Absolutely. In my dissertation process, actually, Mike and I ended up arguing over this a little bit, and I opted, instead of using supernatural, I opted to use cosmic, which is why the question of, well, what does Joel think? What is cosmic? And I get cosmic from the Greek word cosmos and this idea of the universe, the world. I'm less philosophical, more narrative, so I'm going to take us a little to story here. What's happening in Eden, for me, cosmic is the description of Eden, and Eden is a cosmic mountain where and I'm going to try to use words, and you tell me if I'm using them imprecisely or incorrectly, that all of this is galactic in nature. It is a known existence that is perceivable, there's a tangibility to it, there's a way to get there, there's a way to leave there. The question for me is, what happens at the fall? What actually breaks fundamentally in this known world, in the cosmos, in this cosmic reality? And so for me, I think sometimes we're saying some of the same things with different inflections, but for me, I'm looking at it and saying, you can have something that is truly present here right now that is also unseen, and it's still galactic. It's still universal. It's still cosmic. I think the conception of a far off, distant, somewhere else, like other realm, is actually severely unbiblical. The idea of heaven as a far off, distant, somewhere else is extremely unbiblical. The picture of heaven, and from my vantage point, is the new heavens and the new earth. It's a return to the cosmic mountain, which is Eden. So I think about a passage like with Elijah, and he's hanging out with his servant. You guys remember this passage? And the servant's freaked out. He's like, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. And Elijah prays, Lord, help him to open his eyes to see. So is he seeing something that is in another realm? No, I don't think he is. Because how is something in another realm going to make any type of direct impact in that present physical battle? It would be nonsensical in a way, right? So I think he's seeing something there. So I would want to see a framework that says, oh yeah, you can see cosmic as both that encompasses all that is natural and that is spiritual, that these places are breaking in. Like, this is what I think is happening in Gehenna. This is why I think mountains are so important. I think these are places where either for restoration or for ruin, that things are being restored or ruined. I think Molech and Gehenna and the idea of child sex, all these things that are happening is desolation. It's a type of inversion of the I'm using words that we said we don't like of the cosmic.
Stop using that word.
Stopping of the cosmic that is to point us to something, and then you have something like the Garden of Eden. You have the Temple of Jerusalem. Like, it's positioned on top of a mountain. Why is it positioned on top of a mountain? It is the meeting place of God. It is the connection point. I know you've got some great, interesting ideas on what these mountains actually are, and so that's probably where I would try to point to the difference, the distinction, and try to build a bridge where I think both can be accessible at the same time. And there's a really big issue of corporeal. What does it mean to be corporeal? What does it mean to be embodied? What does it mean to not be embodied? So
okay.
Push back.
I shall. So let's think about for a minute some practical situations that we see unfolding in the biblical narrative. We have a situation in which Michael, I believe, is dispatched to reach Daniel, and he is resisted by the prince of Persia. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there is a distance that has to be traversed here. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Yeah.
We have a distance that has to be traversed. We have a blockade of some kind resisting Michael from reaching Daniel. Mm-hmm. He's not like, it's not like Aladdin, the genie in Aladdin, where he can poof himself from one location and appear in the other. Mm-hmm. So, and he was resisted for 21 days, I believe. Mm-hmm. That seems to be a very practical scenario in which someone is coming from somewhere, distant place, and is encountering a resistance from getting from A to B. So there's a distance that must be traversed. It's going to take time, and there's lots of instances that we could think about. So as you all well know, I believe that angels use technology. I think it's exceedingly evident that angels are using technology. And I don't think they do it for our sake. I don't think they do it just as some sort of a symbolic gesture. I don't think angels eat and drink because they just want to fit in and, for whatever reason, eat and drink with Abraham and Lot just because it's a human custom. I don't think that angels are like a genie in that they can take on a corporeal form and suddenly have a digestive system into which the food and drink go. I think that eating and drinking, and as I said earlier, singing and dancing and writing and all of this was in the universe before we were. And I think we have a tendency to spiritualize things that are evident and practical, and we can understand them in the way that we understand them among ourselves, among each other, in our civilization. And so the easiest extrapolation for me is, we have these things here. Therefore, they must also be there, including technology. And I would be of the opinion that when we see angels using chariots of fire, the chariots of God, the chariots of Israel, right? I don't believe in Santa Claus. Why don't I believe in Santa Claus? Well, for one thing, reindeer don't fly, right? Neither do sleds. Why don't I believe in angels flying around in chariots? Because horses don't fly. I'm allowed to do that as a 21st century thinker. And I don't feel like I have to be shackled to a perspective that belongs in the Bronze Age. I think I can take that material, and as a 21st century thinker, not because we're smarter than those people, but simply because we have more information. And we can say, okay, chariot, this was the most advanced form of conveyance known to them at the time. And so, to us, it would be a fighter jet or something like that. And so, that's why when we see a saucer, we know it's kind of like what we have, but it's not exactly what we have. The closest thing we have to a saucer would be, I don't know, space shuttle? I don't know. Well, that would be using some of the saucer technology. So I think that angels clearly use technology. They're not flying on horses. They're not flying. A chariot is not designed to fly. It's just not. So they're not seeing a chariot and horses unless the whole thing is just symbolic. Unless the whole thing is just allegorical and not to be taken as a literal encounter with something that came flying through the air and landed and picked somebody up. If it's to be taken seriously as a physical event, a historical event, then me as a rational thinker, I cannot accept that we're dealing with flying horses because, again, horses don't fly. So, I believe that we're looking at the implements of an advanced civilization from which these entities hail, and that civilization is called the kingdom of heaven. And again, I'll reiterate, there's eating, there's drinking, there's music, there's writing, there's warfare. How do spiritual entities do harm to one another if they're not embodied? So I think that spiritual means something different than what we think. And it doesn't even necessarily matter to me. I don't know, this might make Joel a little angry. It doesn't even matter to me what the ancient Hebrews thought about the concept of what spiritual meant. It doesn't really matter to me what they thought. They might have been inaccurate in their understanding of what spiritual is and what it means. And because they didn't have enough information, they may have assumed that spiritual meant disembodied. And why do I say that? Because I have too many embodied things going on in the Bible. There's too many instances in which angels are eating and drinking. There's the Israelites ate manna from heaven, and the Psalm says that they ate the grain of heaven, the food of the angels. So bread didn't fall, grain fell.
What was the gluten content?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Probably gluten-free.
Probably gluten-free.
Probably gluten-free.
So grain fell.
Much easier on the digestive system, probably.
They were walking a lot.
Grain fell from the celestial Whole Foods. And it was gathered up by the Israelites, by the Hebrews, the grain. And it was baked into bread. Were they eating the food of the angels? And if so, and if the answer is yes, then we have to back engineer it. Where was that grain harvested? What does it come from? Is it like our grain? Does it come from plants? How is it harvested? Is there baking in heaven? If there's singing and merrymaking and writing and all of this in heaven, is there baking? Is there cooking? Right? And I think the answer to all of this is yes, 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 yes. We're going to be us in the kingdom of heaven. Our bodies will be resurrected. We're not going to be bodiless. We're going to have our bodies.
Yeah.
Right. Just like Christ, who did what? After he was raised from the dead. And he did so purposely in front of his disciples, did he not? They were spooked and he said, touch me. See that I have flesh and bone. Ghosts don't have flesh and bone as I have. And of course, Thomas didn't believe. Touch my hand and my feet. See the marks of the crucifixion. This was his body.
What do you think was different about his body then?
Well, that's I think Joel has some very interesting insights, so I'll let Joel answer that. But I'll wrap with this. So not only did Jesus say, touch my hands, what did he say next? Do you have anything to eat? Why did he say that? He's going to further prove his corporeality.
Yeah, it's bodily risen.
Exactly. Fish, bread. He ate it in their midst, it says. Chewed it, swallowed it. The food didn't just disappear into some spiritual realm. It went into his stomach. So those are my thoughts. And
you're sticking to them.
I'm sticking to them.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. And I think that where you and I will probably see differently is the nature of Elohim. I think you bring up some really great thoughts on how does a 21st century thinker think about these ancient texts? So what is the purpose of these ancient texts? So we're going to have to go into some questions there. This is the way I view it. I view it as the purpose of the biblical writers is not to give a science class. It's not. It's not. It would be ridiculous for them to do so. So the question is why? Why would God in his sovereignty and his providence determine that it would be in an ancient Near Eastern context, in a Greco-Roman context, to use human authors, so 66 books, 40 authors over the period of some 2,000 years across 3 continents, which means that you've got 3 major primary languages, all communicating one primary story, the story of God wanting to have his family back together. And the means by which he would do it is his son, Jesus the Messiah. So what is it trying to communicate to us? This is, I think, the substance of this. It's trying to communicate to us what a return to Eden looks like. What does life what was it supposed to look like? And this is where part of this is like interesting conversation, but I think it all comes, even in our areas of differences, Tim and I both agree on like the corporeality of the risen Christ.
Certainly.
You can't get around it. So we talked a little bit about this other night, late. I don't know if it was 11 o'clock or midnight, but we were talking about this. And for me, you said something very, very important, that Jesus' species unique. Jesus is the, article in front, the Son of God, monogeneous, that Greek word, which is where we get begotten. It talks about classification and distinction. There's no one like Jesus, so Jesus is unique. And Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. That he is the prototypical understanding of what the new humanity ought to look like. It is a return to Adam. So we've got to be very careful that we don't try to apply what is very unique and special, uniquely of Christ, which, by the way, that Greek term Christos is a title, not a name. Jesus' social security card does not have Jesus, first name, Christ, last name. Christ is Lord Kyrios. It's a title. In that, why is it that we get these particular descriptions of Jesus in his risen body? This is my assessment of it. It's to point us back to Eden. It's to point us to the eating. It's to point us to the drinking. It's to point us to the relational equity that Jesus had with his disciples. It's to point us to what life in Eden was supposed to look like. Well, what was life in Eden supposed to look like? It was supposed to always be the place where God's 2-family household lived in union together. His cosmic family and his earthly family. And there was never supposed to be a divide or a distinction or a division amongst them. So for me, the fall, one of the tragedies of the fall is that the creation becomes broken as well. This is where I go, okay, this is where you can have the reality of one cosmic world and have things that we cannot see, and yet they're right there. And then your eyes are open and you go, oh, whoa, you're right there. I think the very important detail on Daniel 8, 9, and 10, and the topic of this conversation is cosmic geography. So I want to get into cosmic geography. We're going to have to do a little bit of Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9 worldview stuff, but I'm going to save some of that for later. So you'll just have to follow with me. But the idea here is that these sharim, these princes, they are real entities and beings. Now, can a prince be a prince if he has nothing to be a prince over? No. Just like a king can't be a king if there ain't no kingdom. So these are real things. The question of how this happens, what is happening in the cosmic realm and the battle that's happening, the biblical text to me doesn't give us the answers of the how. It doesn't give the specifics of it. Could it be technological? I'm okay with that. My paradigm's big enough to be like, yeah, sure, it could be. Could it be, here's a fascinating kind of crazy thought that I'm kind of thinking through right now. Could it be that that not all the animals fell at the fall? Eden left. Eden left. Could it be that there are some animals that did fly? Could there have been actual unicorns out there? Like, this is getting real blurry now.
Mermaids.
Real Could Ariel be swimming out in the sea somewhere? So there's got to be an openness to the possibility of it. But this is geopolitical, because the question is, why is this battle taking place? God is trying to reclaim the earth. Because the people live on the earth, and the people are God's people. So the earth is God's. So it's a reclaiming of the nations. And so that to me is kind of the cosmic warfare idea, and why Daniel 8, 9, and 10, and the idea of the Prince of Persia, who I actually think is the embodied figure of Satan, of Satan, is actually fighting against. And then there's another figure that shows up at the end in Daniel 10, and it's not Michael. He's just called the Prince. He just shows up. Who the heck is the Prince? Jesus. Jesus
Prince
is the
of
Prince.
Princes. That's
the
right.
Prince of Princes.
That's right.
And he shows up. And so, and because he's fighting to have his family back together. And that's what's taking place on the cross. There's something else that you had said that I wanted to comment on.
What's the body? What's the difference between the resurrected body of Christ?
Yes. The point of the resurrected body of Christ is to point us back to what our new bodies in heaven are going to look like.
Or they looked like.
Or what Adam probably had. What Adam and Eve would have. That was their natural state of existence.
That's an important distinction right there. I think that we have a Western Christian perspective in which a lot of Western Christians, for some reason, have sort of forgotten about the resurrection. And really.
I know. I'm laughing because it's like, are we being serious though?
It's just about dying and going to heaven.
Yeah.
See,
a far off place.
Exactly.
Or Jesus comes back as like a ghost.
You just die and you go to heaven, okay? But there's that transformation that is absolutely necessary before you can go back into the family, and it's called the resurrection. And I believe that the resurrection is a reset to the blueprint of Adam before the fall. In other words, it's taking your genetic blueprint, say Nate. You're still going to be Nate after the resurrection, but it takes your genetic blueprint. Well, there's a really good Star Trek analogy here. I'm not going to use it though.
We got another 2 days. Save it. We got to save our stuff.
Less freckles, less red.
It's going to take.
No, man,
so we'll take your genetic, your genome. We all have what's called a mutational load. So from deleterious mutations, deleterious just means negative. So we accumulate deleterious mutations over the generations. We all know that a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy is much crappier than the original, right? And that happens with our genome. So Adam's genome, Adam and Eve, their genomes were perfect. Not a single error. 100% perfect. The expression of their humanity was purer than ours. They were more human in some sense than we are. They represented what a human being truly is. We're all a bunch of broken down, crappy versions of Adam and Eve. And that's why I think inherent in this condition, this pristine condition at the beginning, were extraordinary capabilities that they had that we've lost, including, I would argue very strongly, for telepathy. I think that they were highly empathic. I think that human beings and angels, in other words, Adam and his elder siblings, communicated telepathically, primarily. I think that there was a connection, there was a very intense connection that we've lost, and that part of that connection was the way that they interfaced with God. And we have it still, but it's broken. It's a broken radio. We have a broken radio. Our mechanisms of communication, communicative mechanisms are impaired because we are broken down, because that was consequence of the fall. So there was something in Eden. I'm going to try and constrain myself here. There was something in Eden. I mean, constrain my thoughts so I don't go all over the place. There was something in Eden that was regenerative. And we can talk about later on what Eden,
you're going to talk about the tree?
Eden is. We can talk about that later on. There's something in Eden that's regenerative. Because there's two kinds of immortality, and somebody just slapped me if I'm going in the wrong direction. There's two kinds of immortality, which is
conditional, unconditional?
Well, conditional and unconditional, that's right. Or I call it intrinsic and extrinsic. So intrinsic immortality is you are created as an immortal being, period. And then there's extrinsic. And intrinsic means it's part of your nature. Extrinsic means it's something that's outside of your nature, but that it's sustaining you. Extrinsic immortality is an immortality that depends on something. It's conditional. It's a much easier and simpler way to say it. Conditional. In other words, there's something that you need access to in order for you to maintain your immortal condition. Well, that, of course, is the condition that Adam and Eve had.
And the angelic beings and supernatural beings.
And the angelic beings. Very good point. So, I believe there's only one intrinsically immortal being, and that is God.
Yahweh, yeah.
And in fact, Paul says so much, does he not? That there is one who has immortality. That is God.
Yeah, and this is a very important distinction as well, because this helps us to make sense of the point that Tim brought up earlier of the warfare component. Because a lot of times we'll think, well, they're immortal, they can't die. Anybody watch Highlander? You guys remember that show, Highlander? Anybody? There can be only one, you know? Yeah. Where did they get that idea of cutting off people's heads, by the way? I know you care a lot about head cutting, like that whole Goliath thing.
Yeah, maybe.
That's a big deal for you.
That's a big deal. But you can be. We got Luke going. Luke is so happy right now. He's so happy.
Dude, anytime we can poke Tim a little bit, like with that, I know how much he has to take it off the intro. We're never taking it off the intro, Tim.
I think that's an important detail. I think there's an important detail there that is you can be immortal and conditionally and die.
Yes. You
can be immortal conditionally and die.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real cost to the cosmic warfare that's taking place.
Yes.
The unconditional, this is interesting, I don't know what you think about this. The unconditional immortality for me, for humanity, is reserved when Christ comes back and gathers his human family back together with him. At which point I don't see a potential of a relapse of this whole story and saga happening again. I know your brain's going all into different places with that. Let me say one more thing and then you can respond to it.
We'll let these guys jump in.
Yeah, and then the last thing is that Jesus' resurrected body is both and, not either or.
I agree.
It's a both and not an either or. So this is where, again, might be a place of contention between Tim and I. Why wouldn't that also be the plausibility for supernatural? I keep going back to that. I'm going to have to strike it from my vocabulary. From cosmic beings. I don't know. You know? So I think something fundamentally broke at the fall. And I think, here's another one, big, very important one, is Eden goes away. I know you've got some thoughts on where it goes. I think it's accessible. I think Eden goes away, but it's accessible. It's temporal. But then it comes back in Revelation. Anybody remember what the distinction is, but the difference when it comes back? Is it still a garden? It's a garden city. It's a city. So how in the world does a garden leave and come back as a city?
I've got thoughts, but I'm going to hold those thoughts too.
Yeah.
Luke, Nate? Star Trek analogies?
I don't think it's ever happened to you, Nate. I mean, I feel like you guys have all.
No, I mean, I think.
I think we have.
I think that I try to think for the blurry verse here, right? You know, I know a lot of people send us questions and emails, and if an angel doesn't have a body, what is it? Because a lot of people think they shapeshift. They just shapeshift into this. They shapeshift into that. Well, what is it if it's not in its normal state as God made it? If it can just shapeshift in anything.
It's a genie.
But what does it go back to?
Well,
That's a good question.
That's a great question.
What is its natural?
Yeah.
It's a natural state is its taxonomic purpose.
Huh?
If you are a cherubim, and your role and responsibility is to be a guardian throne being, that's what you're supposed to be. If you are an angel, if you're an angelos, if you're a messenger, that's what you're going to be. What's happening in Isaiah chapter 6 with the seraphim, and you know they're flying and they're covering and they're the holy type of. They've got a function, they've got a role, they've got a responsibility. That's what there's a functionality. There's a functionality to it.
What do they look like?
Well, yeah, like I would say the reason that angels
They
lusted
look like
after,
elves in the Lord of the Rings. That's what they look like.
Clear, naturally.
Naturally.
the reason that and Eden is a
Hey,
shire.
Nate.
Yeah.
Nate.
Let's
Hey, did
go.
anyone out there ever watch Ali G back in the day?
Ali G. Did you say?
This feels like an Ali G moment where this thing was like,
What
science,
is it?
yo, what is it? I feel like that was
Exactly.
Nate right there. Yo, what is it? Listen,
deep.
like I'm not going to answer this or even ask a question. I'm going to say that this is one of my favorite, maybe my most favorite segment I think we've ever done. Something about this I love. I love that we can come together. Joel, I think you said it really, really well. Like theology is best done in community, and we can have people that have the main thing is the main thing, and we can talk about the peripheral around it and kind of explore that like in a thought experiment. I just something about this I really love, like because I think people take such hard lines with theology that they can't be flexible, and people have ideas that they still trap themselves into. And the reality is we know so little about this, I think, in general. Like, as you said, the Bible is not explicit. So I just love this. I don't know how to say that, it sounds weird, but I really just love this conversation, aside from the Ali G reference. I just think these are important things. And this, I'm not saying, I'm being serious. I think this is going to be one of the most favorite discussions we've ever had, Nate, just because I think you guys are so smart and also courteous and also coming from different places. I love you guys and I love this. So
You should see us in the Airbnb at night. He's trying to find me.
I sound like Nate here. I sound like Nate here getting all emo.
Nate's like refereeing.
Tin Man got a heart. We got it there.
Nate, you're the emo guy, but I do
That's
love
right.
this, and I just had to say that. I think this is such an important thing, like from a corporate
That's a big
church
deal, dude.
perspective
That's a big
too.
deal.
It's
It's a big
deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah,
just-
you
You're
know,
immortalized.
theology. What is it?
It's just one of these emotions. It's true.
Anyway,
Bust
that's
the whole
all I got.
podcast. So
Get back on track, Tim.
here's what I wanted to say before that. Would you lust after something that you weren't like? Why would an angel lust after a human woman if he wasn't like?
What about bestiality, Nate?
Luke went there.
This is
Luke
a
derailed.
family show. This is a family show.
I
but-
think that's a different thing. That's like
That's
a different,
different conference altogether.
That's a different
Whole
conference.
different event.
thing. Man, thanks for coming.
Yes, but
we had a
That's
real
happening in the
good
Dominican
time.
Republic next down that way.
We may explore this a little more.
Luke's going to act like it glitches.
Even with bestiality, though, you're still approximating something. Are you not? You're still approximating something. We won't go any further than that. But it's still the same mechanisms, the same reproductive organs.
I'm sorry.
It's an issue. Here, I'll try to rein this back together. It's an issue of curiosity gone wrong. It's an issue of curiosity gone wrong. Curiosity without limits is chaos. It is always chaotic. And so the question, from my vantage point, the question about why would the angels long after something or lust after something that they were not already like, I actually think you answer the question by the very basic presumption that they're not like it. So if you're not like that thing, and you have a curiosity of what it is to be like it, and now your thought is, well, God's holding something back from me by not making me like that thing, and this is a cruelty of God, not a kindness of him, and now I have to, we talked earlier, see, take, and desire of that thing of my own, then it kind of starts to make sense. I don't think we have to...
I would say it's an issue of raging lust over curiosity.
I think you're right, but I don't think that you get to raging lust without first curiosity.
Well, sure, but
I think it opens the door. You don't become a porn addict.
But the issue
unless
is
you
the
see
lust.
something and you're like, "Woo, I wonder what that's like."
Well, I mean,
I'm
more saying, let's look at it from like a 1-2 scenario. Like, you would lust after something that's kind of like you, but not. But then the smoking gun in this whole story is that if they shapeshifted exactly as humans, became humans, they would not have this genetic hybrid children. They would not have this wild card of giants. Their DNA would be the exact same.
Right, because something's mixing.
It's an unholy mixture.
You're taking
what's mixing?
You're taking an angelic DNA and you're putting it in.
That's right.
To a human woman.
How'd they do that, Nate?
Oh.
Well.
Gingers don't know, but we can speculate a lot.
And welcome to Blurry After Dark.
This is like, the Club Shay Shay, Shannon Sharp after dark. This is what this episode just became. It's like, oh my gosh.
Somehow the gingers keep coming out of nowhere, but it's usually like two dark-haired people, and this ginger comes out, and they're like, what?
It's supernatural.
It's supernatural.
It's supernatural.
Hey, that's a big deal. But I mean, these giants, they're anomalies. It seems like they're different.
Are we supposed to talk about this?
We're going down to Genesis 6. We're burning all our content for tomorrow morning.
Yeah, we are. We got more. Luke's got lots to add.
That's a big deal.
Let's go back to Eden.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Eden, and then let's try and get before Eden.
I love Eden.
Oh, God, we could.
Can you talk about Rahab? I want you to talk about Rahab, too.
I'm trying to get to Rahab.
I know you're trying to get to... I'm like, get to Rahab, because we need to know what white tohu boho.
It all goes together.
This is fascinating.
Okay, well, let's say...
This is very Tim, because we'll get an hour into the episode, and Tim's like, now that we've got the introduction done, we can get to the topic now.
Yeah, by the way, you get 2-hour episodes. I get like 60 minutes. That's it.
I'm a big deal. That's the new line.
There it is.
That's the new line.
Make it so.
Make it so. Oh my God, this is going off the rails. Okay. All right, Rahab. Okay. So I want to go from Eden back. Get this conversation funneled back into the cosmic, whatever, and the galactic, whatever it was. So here's a good question. We could sit here and talk about Eden for a long time. Eden is really, really fascinating. And we probably have some very divergent ideas, but then I would guess that we have some ideas that converge. And I'll bet you that me and Joel are probably in the minority on some of the things that we agree on in regard to the scholarly community and certainly in regard to traditional Protestantism, even Catholic thinking. So, as I said, I believe that the resurrection resets us to the blueprint of Adam. Jesus is the second Adam. So, it's by way of this reset, genetic reset to Adam, that we can go back into the family. And so it is a return to Eden. I absolutely agree. It is a return. And by saying it's a return to Eden, I would say it's a return to Eden, hence to the house, to the Father's house. Yeah. See, I believe, and I don't know, you might disagree with me here. I think that the term heaven, now heaven's a little different, but we'll use it. I think that the term heaven, Eden, paradise, and the Father's house are synonymous.
Yeah.
And can be used interchangeably. And this is why, you know,
and they are used interchangeably.
And they are used interchangeably.
The Hebrew word Beit is used, we talked about this earlier, kingdom, temple, and household. Yeah. And the temple is the cosmic household of God. Eden is the literal household of God. And you've got the temple imagery that's happening all the way throughout the Old Testament.
Very good. So Eden, this is why you have the Eden as a city in the book of Revelation. Also, think about the tree of life. Where's the tree of life? Well, in the book of Revelation it says that the tree of life, for those who overcome, Jesus says, he will give them the right to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. Well, where is that? So, I don't think he's referencing an earthly location there. So what I see, when you take Eden, when you take heaven, when you take paradise, what I see are a variation of terms that are referencing the same thing. And the same thing, the nucleus, is the family. That's the point. It's the family. So Eden represents mankind's original condition, which was unbroken fellowship with the Father and with his elder siblings, the other sons of God, in the family of God. That's what Eden represents. So, and to segue into the Rahab stuff. Now, we can sit here and talk about Eden for an hour, but to segue into the Rahab stuff, I'm interested in a question that I don't know that many people reflect upon. Why did God create Adam in the first place? Why? Why was the council deliberating in Genesis? Because that's what you have. Mm-hmm. You have a council, the divine council, right? Mm-hmm. Deliberating. Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let him have dominion of the earth. Well, we know that the us is the Elohim, it's the divine council. But why is that decision being made? Why are they deliberating? And this goes back to what we're talking about, and why, you know, the spiritual versus the physical. I see a council deliberating. They're sitting there deliberating. It's in the kingdom of heaven. It's in probably some sort of a magnificent building or something like that. So I'm seeing civilization here. I'm seeing an event that's happening in a timeline that pre-exists us. How did we get to where the council is sitting there deliberating? Are you following me? How did we get to this deliberation?
Yeah.
What happened to motivate the council, and of course the king who's presiding over the council, the Son of God presiding, the Prince of Princes, as he's called in the Old Testament, presiding over the other princes, who I believe are themselves governing other realms. Why are they deliberating? Why are they creating mankind? And I believe that the answer is, and this is again a question not many people consider, why create mankind? The answer is because something catastrophic just happened. Something happened. And God is going to renew the earth. He's going to renew this realm. And they need a new governor. Now, you're going to have to help me here, Joel. Mm-hmm. There's a very interesting couple of verses. So this is the writer of Job, I believe, describing the king's disposition at this event, at this moment where the deliberation is happening to create mankind. Behold, God puts no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. Well, that's interesting. Even in his servants, he puts no trust, and his angels he charges with error. I'm sure that there can be an argument here for this falling within the context of the Deuteronomy 32 worldview and all of that. And I think that's legitimate. But I don't view it that way. I think what we're looking at is a scenario in which, as I said, something catastrophic happened. The council is now deliberating to make a decision to rectify something. So what was that catastrophic thing that happened?
Couldn't it be, Tim, like God the Father and God the Son deliberating? Not the council?
No.
You don't find, typically you're not that defeats the whole purpose of the council. You know, like there's, and we're gonna talk about this later, there's two powers in heaven idea. This, like Psalm 82 is a judgment scene, but like Job 1, opening scene, 1 Kings 12, I think, something like that. These scenes are council scenes where Yahweh is like poses a question or elicits some thought or idea and then invites the angelic host or the cosmic beings to come and give their thoughts and their ideas.
I think this is clearly a divine council scene.
Yeah.
Right? And so again, what is it that happened? I think we all know the answer. There was, in my opinion, there was a galactic rebellion. There was a rebellion.
Where do you get the rebellion from?
From here.
Okay.
So now this is not. I'm going to say this right out of the gates here. For those of you who read my book, this is not something that I would consider to be plainly evident in the Bible. This is something that requires out-of-the-box thinking. Maybe it's stretching it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I'll give you my perspective. And those of you who've read my book probably know where I'm going here. So there's a name, Rahab, that shows up in the Old Testament on several different occasions. Now, what's really interesting about the word Rahab is the connotations of the word Rahab are fierce, insolent, proud, and boaster. And these are the calling cards, I believe, of a renegade prince. A character who is never actually named. I do not believe that Lucifer is the name of Satan, of Satan, the chief of the Satans, let's say. I believe that Lucifer is actually a misnomer. Lucifer's a light bearer that was Jerome made it into a proper name. This character, I don't believe, is ever actually named in the scriptures. I think he is so abominable that he is not given the privilege, let's say, of a name in the scriptures.
He who must not be named?
Exactly. Harry Potter reference. So it is exactly like that. It's he who must not be named.
Yeah.
And he is so abominable. And what he did was so terrible. It created so much chaos and rebellion that he's just referred to in a very indirect way. In the book of Revelation, I think we certainly have the dragon denomination. And the dragon denomination is associated with that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, right? So these are all monikers. None of these are names. They're monikers. They're appellations of somebody. They're not names. And so when we encounter this verses related to Rahab, this is a little bit difficult because it's very technical and I'm trying to condense it. When we encounter verses that have references to Rahab, they always have the same connotation. I'll give you some examples. They're distinctly bellicose, always, and directly associated, I believe, with a rebellion, with the dragon's rebellion and the triumph of the king who vanquished him. So here's some references. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. By his power, he stilled the sea. By his understanding, he shattered Rahab. That's very interesting. Shattered like a pot. Shattered Rahab. Here's another one. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. I think that's a reference to the Son of God. awake as in days of old. That's interesting. The generations of long ago. Was it not you, Son of God, who cut Rahab in pieces, who pierced the dragon? Now we have dragon and Rahab being associated. Remember, Rahab, always bellicose, the connotation, and Rahab means fierce, insolent, proud, boaster. Here's another one. You rule the raging of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them. Who's it talking about here? I believe we're talking about the king. This is the king, okay? This is the triumph of the king over something. So the raging of the sea, you still them. You have broken Rahab in pieces as one who is slain. You have scattered your enemies with your mighty arm. I'm going to read here what I wrote in Birthright. Stilling and ruling the raging sea are metaphors for quelling and subduing insurrection. The shattering of Rahab was the decisive blow that pierced the dragon and brought his rebellion to an abrupt and devastating end. And then I go on to explain what I think Rahab was. I think Rahab was a planet. And I know this may seem out there to some of you, and it's just my conjecture, food for thought, if you will. And I believe there's all kinds of stuff like this laced throughout the Bible, especially the Old Testament. So I believe that before the creation of mankind, let's call it the angelic civilization was inhabiting the universe. And this is a timeline we know nothing about. God doesn't have to tell us anything at all, let alone things that don't pertain directly to us. And this does not pertain directly to us. This would be a timeline previous to the existence of mankind, a pre-Adamic paradigm. There was a galactic war. And when I say galactic war, I mean not just some sort of a spiritual battle, I mean a kinetic war in which the King of Heaven went to battle with his adversary, who is referenced as the dragon in the scriptures, and who drew, and I don't know if it's 1/3, I don't know if the 1/3 thing, we don't have to go there, but who took at least his realm, and I believe, by the way, that the dragon in the book of Revelation has 7 heads. That these are the 7, what I call the 7 dragon princes. I think you have the primary guy, and then you have his subordinates who are with him, the devil and his angels, that were drawn into his rebellion, and they went to war against God. And when you say they went to war against God, who are they warring against? They're warring against the king and the kingdom of heaven. What did Jesus say? The kingdom of heaven suffers what?
Violence.
Violence. And the violent take it by force. This to me speaks of incursions into the kingdom and the armies of the kingdom expelling the intruders. Now, why do you have an army? What is the purpose of an army? The only logical purpose of an army is to protect the borders of a given realm. There is no other purpose for a standing army. So a standing army repels invaders, does it not? And so the kingdom of heaven has enemies. And these enemies aren't just spiritual things. There's violence that's done. And there's battle. There's wars that are waged. And this is, and I'm gonna finish my thought here so these guys can all chime in. But so I see, before the creation of Adam, I see a catastrophic war breaking out in the cosmos, in the universe, possibly even in our solar system. I believe that some of the planets were inhabited by this angelic race, what I call the elder race, and possibly other, and there's very, very, very interesting things that we could tie in. Miros, for example, and there's a lot of very interesting things. But I believe that there was this insurrection against the King of Heaven, and there was a technological war. And when I say technological, I mean a kinetic war. And that as a result of this war, as a result of this war, the universe, let's make it our solar system. Our solar system experienced a catastrophic event in which a planet was literally destroyed. And I believe that planet is Rahab, and I believe it is the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And this may sound fanciful. There's a whole lot more I can't say because it would take hours and hours and hours, but there are so many hints to this pre-Adamic timeline and this galactic war. And it makes perfect sense that after this, remember, he puts no trust in his holy ones. After this conflict, we get to this inflection point where it's time to create a new member of the family. Someone who is untainted by the events of the past. Someone who could be trusted to govern the earth, which is going to be renewed, given into the hands of a new prince, a new member of the family. So I think that's where the human story begins. It doesn't begin from nothing. There's a timeline that precedes us. Now, this is all conjecture, but I find it fascinating, and I could be, of course, completely wrong, but I think there may be something interesting going on here.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, we've talked about this a lot on the show, but, I think there are hints a lot. I mean, I think about just bigger pictures. I mean, when we talk about some of these subjects, there's little hints and clues that, okay, these giants existed, and there's no one smoking gun. And I think what you're trying to say is like, look, there's little verses that hint that we aren't starting at episode 1. We're starting at episode 4.
Precisely.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And, we get into these stories and everyone wants to go back. Okay, Game of Thrones is huge. What's the origin of that story? And I think we all want to know. What was the beginning of the beginning of the beginning, right? And I think that it is a little, I think all of us feel like there was a lot going on before we rolled onto the scene.
The thing about that view that appeals to me is it helps to bring a little bit of a better picture to that opening sentence of Genesis 1. That's what I was talking to Tim about earlier, is that Toho Vabohu, wasteland and wilderness, typically there's not very great explanations for why do we start with that. Like, did God initially intend to start with wasteland and wilderness, right? So there's some questions. So it's at least from my standpoint, as I'm processing through this kind of in real time and working through it, I'm like, oh, that kind of helps to make sense of some of that. Some background, ancient Near Eastern context on it. Rahab was also viewed as one of the sea monsters. Mm-hmm. So there's this, I don't know if you got into it. I remember reading this in the book. But there's a weird passage, I think it's Psalm 40, there's one of the passages where the plural for Rahab is used, Rahabim, which I think is building some of the foundation for what Tim is talking about here. And that Rahabim, that plural, is referring to demonic, categorically demonic entities or beings. And then there's this whole ancient Near Eastern Mesopotamian story of, anybody watch the Eternals? Marvel Eternals, yeah? They just ripped off the Mesopotamian Near East, right? That whole thing. Tiamat, the sea monster, the whole 9 yards, that is ancient Mesopotamian myth. They didn't even try to plagiarize it well. They just used the same names. It was crazy. But that is the story of Tiamat. I mean, Tiamat is another name that would have been used for Rahab, and the whole idea of the origin story of creation, which is chaotic, it's destruction. So some other kind of hyperlinks back to that thought.
Now, we are coming up on 8:30, so I don't know if we just want to roll through that, but it depends on you guys how late everybody wants to go and everything. But let me put a cap on this here real quick. So let me give you a sense of what this may have looked like, okay? I'm going to read here from Birthright. When Rahab exploded, its smoldering shards rained down on the planets in its vicinity, each one striking with a force many times thousand. Who wrote this? Each one striking with a force many thousands of times more powerful than a nuclear bomb, igniting their atmospheres with a firestorm hot enough to liquefy solid rock and vaporize everything else. The impacts would have triggered chains of volcanic eruptions and mile-high tidal waves, melting and washing away every vestige of the rebel kingdoms so that nothing would be left to posterity. Now listen to this. Personified as a spectator to this cataclysmic event, the earth saw and trembled as the insurgent forces of the apostate princes, the gods, were incinerated before the Lord, his garments stained with crimson, striding forward in the greatness of his strength. And this is a verse from Psalm 97. Fire goes before him and burns up his adversaries round about. His lightning lit up the world. The earth saw and trembled. The mountains melted like wax at the presence of the Lord. Now listen to this. Who is this addressed to? Is this addressed to us? Worship him, all you gods. Zion heard this and was glad, and the daughters of Judah have rejoiced because of your judgments, O Lord. For you are the Lord Most High over all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods. That to me, I see the King of Heaven vanquishing his enemies, who we would call gods, before mankind was created. Shattering Rahab like a vessel and bringing this insurrection to an abrupt end. And here's what I say, I'll just continue here. Psalm 89 provides a fitting synopsis of the concepts that I was presenting in this chapter. Written in my opinion, written in memoriam of the dragon's rebellion, the psalm proclaims a solemn warning to all those who would dare to defy the King of Heaven and rise up against him. For who in the skies, or cosmos, can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? This seems to be really addressed to somebody else, not just human beings. A God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all who are around him. O Lord God of hosts, armies, who is mighty as you are, O Lord, with your faithful all around you, in contrast to those who are in rebellion against him. You rule the raging of the sea, insurrection. When its waves rise, you still them. You crushed Rahab like a carcass. You scattered your enemies with your mighty arm. And the arm of the Lord is the Son of God. The heavens are yours. The earth is also yours. The world and all that is in it, you have founded them. And then I go on to talk about how Jesus, what does he do when he's crossing the Sea of Galilee? He calms the sea. This is a depiction. This is the king who quelled the insurrection. And there's reasons why I say that. So when I talk about Rahab, and this, by the way, ties into directly into Edom. Edom is another very interesting, I think, allusion. Edom was one of the arch enemies of Israel, probably the arch enemy of Israel. And Edom means red.
Comes from Esau.
And it's associated with Esau. And I think it's also symbolic, certainly has a historical context. I'm not denying it's very obvious historical context. But I think it also has intimations of something else. I think Edom is a reference to Mars, personally. But, so I see a galactic war erupting in the cosmos, erupting in the galaxy before the creation of mankind. And that it is this war that precipitates, that catalyzes this decision to create mankind. So I think there's a backdrop here it's very subtle, as I said. It's not completely evident. It's very subtle. But I believe it's there nevertheless and may provide a lot of context to the beginning of Genesis.
I'd say it's pregnant with a lot of meaning.
I would say so, Luke.